Every night before I started my patrol, I checked the same three things: the security cameras, the access logs, and the building occupancy system. That night, they all agreed. Every office was locked, every entrance was secured, every employee had already left. According to the system, there wasn't a single person inside the building except me. I've replayed that night in my mind more times than I can count. I've searched for a reasonable explanation: a faulty sensor, an unlocked door, a maintenance worker who never signed in, anything. But no matter how many times I went back over the details, one question never went away. Because about 2 hours later, I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, keeping the exact same pace as mine. Whenever I stopped, they stopped. Whenever I walked, they followed. I searched every hallway, every office, every stairwell. The cameras showed nothing. The access logs showed nothing. The building insisted I was alone. So tell me, if every system confirmed the building was empty, who was walking behind me? At the time, I was working the night shift as a security officer in a county administration building. During the day, the place never seemed unusual. Hundreds of people passed through its doors every morning. Employees moved between offices carrying stacks of files. Elevators opened every few seconds. Phones rang constantly, and conversations echoed through the hallways from the moment the building opened until late afternoon. It was the kind of place nobody paid attention to. Predictable, routine, ordinary. But after midnight, it became something completely different. Once the public entrances were locked and the last employees went home, the entire building fell silent. Not the kind of silence you experience in your own home. This was different. A silence so complete that you could hear the ventilation system changing speed somewhere inside the walls. You noticed the hum of fluorescent lights, the ticking of distant pipes. Even your own footsteps sounded louder than they should. That silence became part of my job. After years of working nights, I knew every sound the building normally made. I knew which ceiling panel rattled whenever the air conditioning switched on. I knew the old elevator sometimes groaned before reaching the 4th floor. I even knew that one office door on the west side always clicked twice before the lock fully engaged. Most people would never notice details like that. I had no choice. When you spend hundreds of nights alone inside the same building, you learn its habits. My routine never changed. At 11:30 p.m., I walked through every floor while the cleaning crew finished their work. At midnight, the last custodian signed out and left through the main entrance. I watched the front doors lock automatically behind him. Then I returned to the security office. Before every patrol, I checked the monitoring system. Camera feeds, emergency exits, fire alarms, access control, motion sensors, everything reported normal. The occupancy display showed exactly what I expected. Occupants remaining. One me. No contractors, no maintenance crews, no employees working late, no scheduled deliveries, just me. People sometimes assume working alone at night must be frightening. Honestly, it wasn't. Most nights were incredibly boring. I'd make coffee, fill out inspection reports, watch the camera feeds, walk my patrol every 2 hours, repeat. There was something almost comforting about knowing exactly how every night would unfold. Nothing ever happened. At least, nothing that couldn't be explained. That particular Thursday started exactly the same as every other shift. A light rain had been falling since sunset, tapping softly against the windows overlooking the parking lot. By 1 o'clock, even the traffic outside had disappeared. The entire neighborhood felt abandoned. I grabbed my flashlight and began my next scheduled patrol. The first floor was exactly as I'd left it. Reception desks sat in darkness. The waiting area was empty. The vending machines cast pale blue light across the polished floor. The second floor was no different. Conference rooms locked, hallways empty, everything in perfect order. When I reached the third floor, I slowed down without really thinking about it. There was nothing unusual there. No reports, no incidents, no broken equipment. And yet, I had never liked that floor. Not because I had seen something, because of how it felt. The air always seemed strangely still, as though the ventilation never quite reached that hallway. It wasn't colder, it wasn't darker. It simply felt heavier. I never mentioned that feeling to anyone. It sounded ridiculous. Besides, every old building has places that make people uncomfortable. I finished checking each office door and started walking back toward the elevator. Halfway down the corridor, I stopped. Not because I saw movement, not because I heard a voice. I stopped because I suddenly realized something was missing. The familiar hum of the ventilation system had disappeared. For the first time since I'd worked there, the hallway was completely silent. I stood perfectly still, listening. 5 seconds passed, then 10. Nothing. No machinery, no distant elevator, no air moving through the vents, just absolute silence. Trying to ignore the uneasy feeling creeping into my stomach, I took one slow step forward. A second later, somewhere farther down the empty hallway, someone else took one too. I froze. The sound had been unmistakable. One step, not loud, not hurried, just deliberate. I stayed where I was, staring into the dim corridor ahead. Nothing moved. The offices on both sides remained dark, their glass panels reflecting only the pale ceiling lights. For several long seconds, the hallway looked exactly as it always had. Empty. I told myself the same thing anyone would. Old buildings make noise. Metal expands. Pipes shift. Air ducts carry sound farther than you expect. After enough night shifts, you stop questioning every little creak. Or at least, you're supposed to. I took another step. The hallway answered. One step, again. This time there was no doubt. It matched my pace perfectly. I stopped. The sound stopped. A cold sensation settled somewhere in the back of my neck. I waited. 5 seconds. 10. Nothing. I slowly unclipped my radio. Unit 1 to control. Radio check. Only static answered. That wasn't unusual. Certain parts of the building had poor reception because of the reinforced concrete walls. I tried once more. Control, do you copy? Silence. I slipped the radio back onto my belt and forced myself to keep walking. If someone had somehow entered the building, I needed to find them. The nearest emergency stairwell was less than 50 feet away. Its heavy fire door was still closed. The alarm seal hadn't been broken. No one had used it. I checked the handle anyway, locked, exactly as it should have been. Next came the maintenance corridor, a narrow passage that connected several electrical rooms and storage closets. The motion-activated lights switched on one section at a time as I walked through. White light, darkness, white light again. The only sound was my own breathing. I inspected every storage room, every utility closet, every maintenance cabinet. Nothing. No signs that anyone had been there. As I stepped back into the main hallway, I noticed a small green light flashing above one of the office doors. The electronic card reader. Someone had just unlocked the room. I stared at it. The green light blinked once more. Then the lock clicked. The door eased open only a few inches. No one came out. I waited. Nothing happened. Keeping one hand on my flashlight, I pushed the door open. The office was empty. Rows of desks, computer monitors asleep. Coffee mugs left beside keyboards. Family photographs sitting quietly beneath the glow of emergency lighting. It looked as though everyone had simply gone home a few hours earlier. I checked every corner, behind the filing cabinets, inside the small records room, even beneath the conference table. No one. As I turned to leave, the office door drifted shut behind me. Click. The magnetic lock engaged. I immediately pulled out my phone and logged into the building's access management system. Every employee badge was recorded automatically. Time, door, employee ID. If someone had unlocked that office, their badge would be listed. I searched the last 10 minutes. Nothing. No authorized entry. No denied access. No activity whatsoever. According to the system, that office had never been opened. I read the log again, then a third time. The result never changed. The lock had disengaged. The door had opened. Yet the computer insisted it had never happened. For the first time that night, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Not fear, uncertainty. Because every explanation I came up with depended on one thing: someone else being inside the building. But every system I trusted, every camera, every access log, kept telling me exactly the opposite. I was alone. Or at least, that's what the building wanted me to believe. Just then, somewhere above me, I heard footsteps again. Slow, measured, crossing the 4th floor. A floor I had personally inspected less than 30 minutes earlier. I looked toward the ceiling. The footsteps were unmistakable. Slow, evenly spaced, crossing the 4th floor directly above me. I checked my watch. 2:18 a.m. Less than half an hour earlier, I had personally inspected that floor. Every office had been locked, every conference room was empty, every emergency exit had been secured. There was no reason for anyone to be there. Still, I wasn't about to ignore it. I headed toward the nearest elevator. The hallway seemed quieter than before. Even the faint hum of the fluorescent lights felt distant. I pressed the call button. Nothing happened. I pressed it again. The button lit up, but the elevator didn't move. Then I heard it. The low metallic groan of cables somewhere inside the shaft. The elevator was already moving, but it wasn't coming to me. It was descending from above. The digital display changed. 6. A second later. 5. Then 4. It stopped. I waited for the doors to open. They didn't. The display remained frozen on the number 4, as though someone had called the elevator and simply left it there. I stood perfectly still. 5 seconds passed, then 10, no movement, no sound. Without warning, the elevator started moving again. 3, 2, 1. The doors finally slid open. The cabin was empty. No one stepped out. No one had been inside. A wave of unusually cold air drifted into the hallway. Not freezing, just cold enough to make me notice it immediately. I stepped inside. The doors closed behind me. The control panel showed no active floor selection, no emergency stop, no maintenance mode, nothing. I pressed 4. The elevator began climbing. The ride should have lasted only a few seconds. Instead, every second seemed unusually long. The motor echoed softly through the shaft. Then, I heard it. One footstep. It didn't come from the hallway. It came from somewhere above the elevator. Another. Slowly crossing the roof of the cabin. One side, then the other. I looked up instinctively. The ceiling above me was solid steel, no access panel, no maintenance hatch, no space where anyone could possibly be walking. The footsteps stopped. A soft chime sounded. 4th floor. The doors opened. The hallway was empty. Exactly as I remembered it. Every office remained locked. The emergency lights glowed faintly along the baseboards. Nothing had changed. I walked the entire corridor from one end to the other. Not a single open door. Not a single person. Even the air felt still again. If someone had been there only moments earlier, there was nowhere they could have gone. I turned back toward the elevator. Before stepping inside, I looked up at the security camera mounted above the intersection. An idea crossed my mind. If I'd heard someone walking, the cameras would have recorded it. I returned to the security office and immediately opened the surveillance system. Every hallway in the building had both video and audio recording. I rewound the footage to the exact minute I had heard the footsteps. There I was, walking alone through the corridor, stopping, looking around, exactly as I remembered. The hallway behind me remained empty from beginning to end. No figure, no shadow, no reflection, nothing. Then I noticed something strange. The audio meter beneath the video suddenly spiked. Once, then again. Exactly where I had heard the footsteps, the microphone had recorded 2 distinct impacts. Clear enough to trigger the system's sound indicator. I increased the volume. Step. A pause. Step. The sound was unmistakable. Heavy shoes striking the floor. The camera had captured the audio perfectly. But the video showed absolutely nothing. I replayed the recording several times. Each replay made less sense than the last. The microphone insisted someone had walked through that hallway. The camera insisted no one had. Then another notification appeared on the monitor. Elevator activity. Floor 4. I looked up at the live camera. The elevator doors were opening again. No one stepped out. But before the doors closed, the microphone picked up one more sound. A single, slow footstep from inside an elevator that was completely empty. I sat motionless, staring at the monitor. The recording ended. The hallway remained empty, yet the footsteps were there. Clear enough that the audio software had automatically marked them as significant sound events. I closed the playback window and leaned back in my chair. There had to be something I was missing. A faulty microphone. Interference. A software glitch. Maybe the sound had traveled through the ventilation ducts from another part of the building. It wasn't impossible. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. I opened the building's maintenance records. Every technical issue was documented automatically. Power fluctuations, door malfunctions, camera failures, elevator service calls, microphone errors. Nothing. Every system had reported normal operation throughout the night. I glanced toward the digital clock on the wall. 2:46 a.m. Only a few hours remained until sunrise. Normally, that thought would have been comforting. This time, it wasn't. I couldn't stay inside the security office forever. Sooner or later, I would have to complete my final patrol. After several minutes, I picked up my flashlight and unlocked the office door. The hallway outside was exactly as I'd left it. Empty, quiet, almost ordinary. Almost. As I walked toward the west corridor, I noticed something strange. The air felt different. Not colder, not warmer, just unusually still. It reminded me of the atmosphere before a thunderstorm, when everything seems to pause for a moment. Even the faint hum of the ventilation had disappeared again. I stopped. The silence settled around me like a heavy blanket. Then I smelled something. It wasn't strong, just a faint scent drifting through the hallway. Old concrete, dust, and beneath it, the sharp smell of ozone, the same smell you notice after lightning strikes nearby. It lingered for only a few seconds before fading away. I continued walking. My flashlight swept slowly across the polished floor. The corridor ahead remained empty. Office doors, emergency exit signs, nothing unusual. Then, something caught my eye. Not in front of me, beside me. A movement inside the reflection of a glass office wall. I turned instantly. The hallway behind me was empty. I looked back at the reflection. Nothing. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe my own flashlight beam had shifted. I took another step. A soft scraping sound answered somewhere ahead. Not footsteps. Something dragging lightly across the floor. Scrape. Pause. Scrape. The sound was uneven, slow, deliberate. I stopped walking. The scraping stopped immediately. I waited. Silence. I took one careful step forward. The scraping returned. Exactly once. I felt my pulse begin to rise. This wasn't random anymore. It was reacting to me. The realization sent a chill through me unlike anything I'd experienced that night. I raised my flashlight higher and slowly rounded the next corner. Nothing. The corridor stretched away in both directions, empty, perfectly still. No open doors, no movement, no explanation. As I lowered the flashlight, the beam briefly crossed the polished floor. For a split second, I saw footprints. They weren't muddy. They weren't wet. They appeared only because they reflected the light differently than the surrounding floor. One footprint, then another. They began several feet in front of me, continued across the hallway, and ended abruptly against a solid concrete wall. I stared without breathing. There was no doorway, no maintenance hatch, no hidden passage. Nothing. I stepped closer. The footprints faded. Not gradually, instantly, as though the floor had erased them. Before I could react, my radio crackled sharply against my belt. I grabbed it. The display remained blank. No incoming transmission, no active channel. Then, through the speaker, I heard one slow footstep. Just one. The sound ended. Silence returned. And less than a second later, from somewhere deep inside the building, I heard that exact same footstep again. Not through the radio, this time with my own ears. I didn't move. The radio was still in my hand. Its screen was dark. No active channel. No incoming transmission. And yet, I had heard that footstep as clearly as if someone had been standing beside me. A second later, the exact same sound echoed through the hallway. One step. Nothing more. I waited. Silence settled over the building once again. The kind of silence that almost convinces you nothing ever happened. I looked at my watch. 3:07 a.m. Less than 3 hours until sunrise. For the first time in my career, I considered calling someone to replace me. Not because I believed something supernatural was happening, because I could no longer trust what I was experiencing. Every explanation I came up with collapsed the moment another impossible detail appeared. I made my way back to the security office. This time I walked faster than usual. Not running, just no longer interested in proving I wasn't afraid. I locked the office door behind me. The metallic click sounded strangely reassuring. I sat in front of the monitor wall and began checking every live camera feed: lobby, reception, parking garage, loading dock, north stairwell, south stairwell, every floor. Nothing. The building looked exactly as it always had. Quiet. Still. Empty. I opened the recording from camera 14 again. The same hallway, the same empty corridor, the same 2 footsteps captured by the microphone. Then something else caught my attention. The timestamp. I hadn't noticed it before. The recording skipped ahead by exactly 4 seconds. No distortion, no static, no warning. 1 frame and then suddenly another 4 seconds later. I replayed it. The same thing happened. Again. Exactly 4 seconds missing. Curious, I checked the system log. Every interruption should have been recorded automatically. Power loss, connection failure, storage error. There was nothing. According to the software, those 4 seconds had never disappeared. They simply didn't exist. A quiet chime interrupted my thoughts. I looked at the live feed from the 4th floor. The elevator doors were opening. No one entered. No one stepped out. The doors remained open for several seconds before closing again. A minute later, they opened once more. Still empty. The elevator repeated the same pattern over and over. 4th floor, doors open, empty hallway, doors close. I switched to the lobby camera. The elevator began descending. 4th, 3rd, 2nd, 1st. The doors slid open. No one. Then something happened that I still can't explain. The motion detector above the elevator turned green. Movement detected. I leaned closer to the monitor. The hallway remained completely empty. No shadow. No reflection. Nothing crossed the frame. The detector stayed active for nearly 20 seconds. Then it switched off by itself. As if whatever had triggered it had finally walked away. I never completed my final patrol. When the morning supervisor arrived just after 6, I handed him the keys and told him I was filing an incident report. He didn't seem surprised. I wrote everything down exactly as it had happened. The footsteps, the access door, the elevator, the recordings, the missing 4 seconds. He read the report without saying a word. When he finished, he folded the paper and placed it inside his desk. Then he looked at me for a long moment before asking a question I wasn't prepared for. "Did they stop every time you stopped?" I felt my stomach tighten. I had never mentioned that, not in the report, not to anyone. Before I could answer, he nodded quietly, almost to himself. "That's what the others said too." He never explained who the others were. I didn't ask. I resigned 2 weeks later. I've worked night shifts in other buildings since then. Hospitals, warehouses, office complexes. None of them have ever felt the same. But every now and then, when an empty hallway suddenly becomes unnaturally quiet, I instinctively stop walking. Not because I'm afraid of hearing footsteps, because part of me is still listening, to find out whether something else stops with me. To this day, no official explanation has ever accounted for everything that happened during that shift. The security system never reported another person inside the building. The access logs showed no unauthorized entries. The surveillance cameras never captured anyone walking those hallways. And yet, the audio recordings clearly documented footsteps where no one could be seen. Former employees have quietly shared similar experiences over the years. Most refused to speak about them publicly. Some dismissed them as exhaustion after long overnight shifts. Others insisted the building simply had strange acoustics. A few admitted they stopped working nights altogether. Whether those incidents were connected, or merely unsettling coincidences, has never been established. Perhaps every detail can still be explained by faulty equipment, human perception, or a series of ordinary events occurring at exactly the wrong time. Or perhaps some places hold on to something we still don't understand. Something that never appears on a security camera, never unlocks a door with a key, and never leaves behind a single piece of evidence. Except for one sound, one slow, deliberate footstep. If this case teaches us anything, it's that the most unsettling mysteries aren't always the ones we can see. Sometimes, they're the ones that seem to know exactly where we are. And if you've ever found yourself completely alone in a silent building late at night, listening to footsteps that shouldn't exist, you may understand why some people never volunteer for the night shift again. Because once you've heard something you can't explain, every quiet hallway sounds different forever.